Hello, everyone. Welcome to our sixth virtual community session. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Amy Totten, and I'm a member of the communications team for KMK. If you have seen our past sessions, you know we are doing these virtually because of COVID-19. Our plan is to hold a session each month featuring a different department at KMK. Each session is recorded and posted to our YouTube and Facebook pages. We encourage you to check them out. As Crystal mentioned in our last session, it is important to us that we are informing the Migma of Nova Scotia. So with that, we will be holding these sessions at different times on different days to see what works best for all of you. We will also issue a newsletter that features all of our departments the same week as the sessions. If you want to be on our distribution list for our newsletters, media releases, and other items, you can let us know through email at info@migmarights.com or through our contact us form on the website at www.migmarights.com. This month's session will focus on an overview of Magaliugig Ganijana, also known as MKK. Today, we'll hear from Jacqueline Paul, the MKK project lead, and Heather McNeil, who is legal advisor for MKK. We are so proud to have these two as part of our KMK team. So with that, let me turn things over to Jacqueline and Heather.
Thank you so much, Amy. Hello, everyone. So we have developed a PowerPoint for our presentation today to help you follow along to what we're going to be going over. So thank you so much for bringing that up for us, Amy. Next slide, please. So I'm going to start off the presentation by just telling you a little bit about who we are. And what is it that our team does. Mauglegi Ginijana was formerly known as the Enhanced Child and Family Initiative. However, in 2018, during an elders gathering, the elders had suggested renaming the initiative as a way of reclaiming it, and we couldn't have agreed more. So the name Mauglegi Ginijana came about, and it means keeping our children together, which is absolutely fitting for the work that we're doing. The work that MKK focuses on is creating a child welfare system that embodies Migma customs, traditions, principles, and values, emphasizing on how we look at one another and how we've cared for one another. We are working collaboratively to create a better future for Migma children and families, a future where Migma children are strongly connected to their culture and community and live in safe, healthy, and nurturing homes. Next slide, please.
Yeah, thank you, Jacqueline. I think I'll jump in here on this one. I guess a little overview of how the initiative got started. Back in 2015, the province of Nova Scotia had proposed amendments to the current Children and Family Services Act. And at that initial stage, there was not consultation with the Assembly of Mi'kmaq Chiefs. And there is a consultation process under the terms of reference that didn't happen. The chiefs got involved, and consequently to that, the consultation took place. Because of that consultation, there was over 25 amendments made to the Children and Family Services Act that is in place now, and that impact the Mi'kmaq of Nova Scotia. The Assembly identified that there were still gaps in the process that weren't addressing many of the issues that were of concern to the Mi'kmaq. And that's what the initiative, the MKK initiative, was born out of those gaps and was formed, and that's the work that we've been doing since that time. Next slide, please.
So just to explain a bit about the image that you're seeing before you, this kind of shows a timeline for us to engage. And in the fall of 2018, this initiative began. And within months and the beginning of 2019, the MKK initiative expanded, conducting more research and engaging with elders. In 2020, the MKK team continued to research, focusing more on engaging with youth this time. And through the years that have gone by, we have had several youth gatherings, whether those be retreats or on land-based learning opportunities and hearing from the youth directly. In 2021, after researching and engaging with our elders and youth, The MKK team had planned on bringing information gathered back to communities. However, COVID did severely impact that plan, but not completely derailed it. We have been using social media outlets such as this to try to engage in the meantime. Going forward, our engagement plan for 2021 is to engage with as many Migma as possible. Once we've listened and written and built policy and law, we will re-listen, rewrite, and rebuild if necessary. By 2023, the goal is to have the law ratified and in place. Next slide, please. So what you're seeing before you here is a specialized working groups that we've kind of zoned in on. And the list of working groups are key areas for the MKK team. Child welfare is a huge undertaking and there's many moving parts to it. And this is just a small piece of some of the areas that we've been looking at. But the objective of these working groups for customary care and custom adoption, foster care and placements, assessments, facilities and family resources, Wigamanich Gigamana, systemic and structural barriers, and prevention and early intervention are some of the working groups. And I'll just loop back around to talk about what those objectives are for these working groups and why we do gather. And it's to examine the current gaps in the system. We know they exist, but we want to hear more about them and hear them from other folks. We need to identify and develop culturally appropriate resources and supports. We have reviewed the assessment tools in the area of child welfare and determined that these assessments create barriers for Migma families. We also want to identify systemic and structural barriers that are inhibiting holistic family wellness. And what barriers are currently in place that are hindering the reunification of families? From these working groups, we have been and will continue to develop policies and law for the governance and implementation of traditional community-based parenting and care systems. Next slide, please, Amy.
This slide here is a list of priorities for the Mi'kmaq child welfare legal regime to look at. They're not the only priorities, they're significant ones. So I thought I'd kind of maybe take some time and talk about each one of these a little bit more in detail rather than just putting them up and saying those are what they are about. So maybe the first one to look at is the Mi'kmaq jurisdiction and governance. But before I get there, I do want to say that this is what we're drafting is a draft law. It's been written in phases. It's still in draft form. And there's been several reviews by different reviewing committees involved that have contributed to its contents. So it's a document that's evolving as we work on it. So there's further drafting to be done and reviewed. In fact, after this meeting, I have a review meeting on the draft law. So this draft law will not become law until, and this is a really important point, until it's been reviewed and accepted by our leadership and our community. So before I say anything about that, I just want you to know it's all draft and there's lots of opportunities to have input into it. And a couple of notes before we start really talking about the priorities is that what's the purpose of the law? Primary purpose, to promote the best interests, protection, and well-being of our Mi'kmaq children and their identity. Children in this law are at the center, as are the families. Another purpose is to promote the healthy Mi'kmaq families and communities and thereby eliminate the overrepresentation of Mi'kmaq children in child welfare systems. And we all know that that's been a concern for as long as we can remember, since child protection. The third primary purpose is to promote a child welfare system that reflects Mi'kmaq principles and values, community involvement and support. That's what our law is going to be about. So the priorities, I've kind of set out 11 here, or we've set out 11 here, and there are others as well. They're in the law, they're being reviewed as we speak, but these ones here are more, I think, what we've heard in working groups, what we've heard from community, from leadership, through many different meetings that we've had, and even prior to our involvement, these are things that we were hearing that came to our attention. So the first one's Mi'kmaq jurisdiction and governance. So the Creator, we've heard this from the elders, that the Creator gave the Mi'kmaq sovereignty to govern themselves. And our child welfare law is an exercise of Mi'kmaq sovereign right and jurisdiction to do so. And we also rely on the inherent right in self-government recognized and affirmed by Section 35 of the Constitution Act, which is a pretty significant piece for us doing this child welfare law. The second priority is, maybe I'll bother saying all these priorities, but it's a priority. Application to all Mi'kmaq in Nova Scotia, another priority. So our child welfare law will apply to all Mi'kmaq children and families in Nova Scotia who are currently involved or who become involved with the child welfare system. So it's all Mi'kmaq. Another priority is the customs, traditions, and ceremonies. We don't see some of these things in other laws, but they will be in our law. Our law will be administered and interpreted in accordance with Mi'kmaq customs, traditions, ceremonies, and these will be well acknowledged throughout the law. And some of those customs, traditions, and ceremonies will be unique to each community. We'll also have Mi'kmaq principles and values in our law. Our law promotes a child welfare system that reflects our Mi'kmaq principles, our values, our community involvement, and our community support. So that the elders, Grand Council, youth, amongst many others, have shared with us what the Mi'kmaq principles and values what they are and what's important to child welfare work, and those that need to be reflected throughout our law. And our law is being drafted in that sense. Another huge, I guess, priority is the best interest of a Mi'kmaq child. So the best interest of a Mi'kmaq child must be the primary consideration in making any decisions or taking any actions when providing child and family services under this law. And in particular, in the cases of decisions or actions related to taking a child into care. Primary consideration must be given to the child's physical, spiritual, emotional, cognitional, and psychological safety, security, and well-being, as well as to the importance of the child having an ongoing relationship with their family and their Mi'kmaq community, and preserving that child's connection to their community and their culture, which includes their language and their family and their aunties and uncles, their godparents, their grandparents, all of those things. One of the concerns that's, we've had for a very long time is Mi'kmaq child placements. Where are children being placed? And many children to date have been placed out of community with folks they don't know, well-meaning, I'm sure, but placed in foster care and places like that where they don't have a connection to that home. So through the discussions that we've had, again, primarily with the elders, Grand Council, and youth, principles with respect to child placement of a Mi'kmaq child when they are unable to live with their parents or caregivers have been identified. So we've looked at 5 different placements, and the first starting place with the first principle kind of that we've identified is that Mi'kmaq children need to be looked after by Mi'kmaq in their communities where they are familiar with their own people and their own surroundings. The second principle is when a Mi'kmaq child is no longer able to stay with their parents or caregiver for whatever reason that may be, the child and the parents can be involved in the decision as to where the child will be placed. Grandparents and godparents have a significant role in caring for a Mi'kmaq child when the child's parents or their caregiver cannot be available to them. Other family members can step in to care for a Mi'kmaq child when the child's parents or caregiver are unable to. And significant others to the Mi'kmaq child can be considered relatives and can play a role in caring for a child when the child's parents or caregiver are not able to. So those are like the principles around the placement. Then there's what are the placements themselves. So we're looking at a priority of placements, and those need to be consistent with the Mi'kmaq child's best interest and safety, consideration of placement options, many which can include customary care placements. So we looked at a priority of placements and what would that look like in a Mi'kmaq community? Well, if we're going to place a child first, unless there's a reason not to, the child should be placed with the child's parents or caregiver, number one. If that's not possible, we move to the second stage with another adult member of the child's family. And I'm just going to say if that doesn't work out, meaning that option isn't available. So if that option isn't available, then we move to with another adult who belongs to the same Mi'kmaq community as the child. So if it was a child in Millbrook, then we would be looking for an adult in Millbrook to look after the child. If that's not possible, then we move to with an adult who belongs to a Mi'kmaq community other than the one to which the child belongs. And that may mean that the child was from Millbrook, maybe somebody in Eskasoni would look after the child. If that doesn't work out, then we look for it with an adult who belongs to an Indigenous community to whom the child may have a connection or has a connection. If that doesn't work out, then it looks with any other adult, and that pretty well could be anybody. So it's all about really the principles and the placements really are all about keeping the child, whenever possible to do so, in their home or in their community with those that care and nurture and love them, where they can preserve and promote their identity, where their child's preservation and promotion of their identity and culture remains intact. So that's the issues on the priority on the best interest of the child. The child and the family involvement, the child and family involvement in decision making needs to happen. It's the decisions and things like that are affecting them, so they need to be involved in that. So we're suggesting that a Mi'kmaq child should be informed of their circumstances and be involved in the planning and decision making. After consideration has been given to the child's age, maturity, understanding, and willingness to participate. So a child has to have some understanding of it. You're not going to ask a 5-year-old, what they want to do necessarily. I mean, maybe a 5-year-old's mature, but to have major involvement into it, they need to have that maturity and age and understanding to be able to participate. It is important that parents and caregivers and all family members who are significant in the child's life be given an opportunity and assistance to participate in informed, they need to know what's going on, informed decision-making processes that are likely to have a significant impact on the life of the child. Elders should be involved in informed decisions around the Mi'kmaq children in any community, particularly around a placement. Elders will know what's going on in communities and in particular families. Community is family. Bottom line, community is family and should include anyone identified by the family or the Mi'kmaq child as being a support to them. Recognition needs to take place that each band has a responsibility to care and protect Mi'kmaq children of their community, hence why the Assembly has taken on this goal to have a Mi'kmaq child welfare regime. Decisions about a Mi'kmaq child have to be consistent with our traditions, our culture, our values, our language, and they need to be relevant to the child. So those are some kind of things that we've talked about in terms of decision making, how the child and the family can be involved in that. The other thing that we need to have is culturally respectful services. And considering the historical and intergenerational trauma experienced by the Mi'kmaq of Nova Scotia, voluntary support services that families are going to participate in if they get involved in child protection need to support a parent or caregiver and need to be culturally relevant, culturally safe in order to support better understandings and holistic healing. And you're going to have better outcomes and reunification if culturally respectful services are in place. I don't think that would not be the case. So I think that's a very important piece of it as well. Services have to promote the integrity of the family as a whole. So where it appears that services are necessary to enable a Mi'kmaq child to remain with the child's parent or caregiver, all reasonable measures to provide services to families and children that promote that integrity of the family have to take place before a child is removed from a parent or caregiver's care. So very important piece of it. So, and the services that we're looking at to promote the integrity of the family include, and they're not limited to this. These are just like broader kind of broad stroke identification of services. Early intervention services, prevention services, so a big focus on those, and then protection services. So if there's a way to intervene prior to protection, then that needs to take place so that the child stays with the family if at all possible. We're also looking at a Mi'kmaq customary adoption protocol, and that has been drafted and in principle, and the Assembly has seen that and accepted that in principle, and it's currently being taken out to communities now, or not communities, sorry, chief and councils for band council resolutions. It's still going through its reviews and will at some point come back for feedback. But in recognition, the adoption protocol in recognition of Mi'kmaq customs, practices, and traditions, the customary adoption protocol offers services to facilitate customary adoptions for Mi'kmaq children in families in Nova Scotia. And the last priority, I think it's my last priority, yeah, is we've heard a lot about youth aging out of care, and the current Children and Family Services Act has some references to it, but our communities have told us, the folks that we've had on working groups and all the other elders, youth, Grand Council have told us the importance of youth aging out of care and that it needs to be different. And so what we've heard from many concerned Migma regarding this importance is that we may need to look beyond the current age of 18 years old. The current Children and Family Services Act in Nova Scotia ages children out prior to them reaching 19 years of age, unless that youth suffers a disability. What we've heard is that our Migma youth in care need to remain in care with agreement by the service provider and consent of the youth beyond the age of 19 years old, maybe up to the age of 25 years old, until I guess that there could be a successful independence aging out of care. So if that means the child has to, we say the child because the law will have to be written like that, but the youth has to stay into care until they're 25 because they need to, because they won't be successful at independence on their own, then that's the way, that's what we have to look at. We've also heard as well that a Migma youth aging out of care may still require supportive services that include, amongst other things, housing, access to income support, training, education, mental health support, dental, overall healthcare support. All of those things need to be looked at to make that child successful and to be okay when they're on their own, because that's what we really want. We want young people to be able to be on their own, and take care of themselves and not end up in a system that they just don't deserve that. They really don't. We also talked about reintegration ceremonies being used for Mi'kmaq children aging out of care and to support a reconnection to their family, to their community, and to their nation. So we're looking at that as well. And the other piece I did want to mention as well is identification of roles of traditional and temporary leadership and community members in the implementation of the law. So the role, really important, is the role of the elders, the family, community, Grand Council, leadership, band designates cannot be overstated. Each play a major role in the care, the well-being, and the safety of our children, and those need to be recognized in the law. We've not seen that in other laws in Nova Scotia, not in the same way as our law will have it. Next slide, please. So that was a long slide, and I'm sorry, but I thought it was really important to talk about that. We've identified in our legal regimes 3 phases to do this work, and we've but for the exception of the engagement with community in the first phase, because of COVID, that kind of hindered us, and we're moving into that now. So we're in phase 2, and I think Jacqueline mentioned some things about revising, rewriting, re-engaging, re-listening, all of those things. We're doing that as we speak, and we're constantly writing, we're constantly taking what we have out to the groups that we're associated with at this time. The next, and we're also, by the way, taking it out. We've had, I think, 3 symposiums to date, and we've taken parts of what we're doing, different aspects of it on different symposiums, out to those that attended. So we're reaching out to community in that way through the symposiums. You may have attended the last symposium, which was virtual and was our first virtual one, but it was actually fairly successful, and we were able to share a lot of the information up to that point in time as to what the work was, what was involved in the work we were doing. Phase 3 is a legal review, and we're started that process. And again, like I said, it's not finalized or anything like that. There's still more pieces to work out, but it's being done. It's being legally reviewed, and ultimately, at the end of phase 3, it'll be ratified through the Assembly, and then it will be implemented in our Mi'kmaq communities. Next slide, please. And I mentioned legal reviews. We have a legal review committee established for our initiative, and it's got about 14 members on it. The majority are Migma, and we rolled it out as 7 distinct segments because it was too large to do all in one day, obviously. And so we rolled it out into 7 segments of the draft law. And the legal review committee has looked at all of those stages, provided us with their comments. We have other groups as well that were committed to the work and reviews and input. We have elders involved in some of our working groups, and one of we have a technical committee group and elders involved in that. And we have, we mentioned, we've talked to the youth and Grand Council. We talked to Migma Family and Children's Services as well for their thoughts on particular sections. Next slide, please. We have a Migma, a Glegi Ginijana Advisory Committee, and it's made up of primarily representatives from the Mi'kmaq organizations that have an interest in advancing the child welfare work that we're doing. We also have lead chiefs that are on that. Chief Deborah Robinson and Chief Norman Bernard are with us on this advisory committee. And we bring things to the committee basically for advice and guidance on what we're doing, you know, what we're drafting, activities, policies, anything to do with our legal regime development. We take it to the advisory committee. However, just so you know that this is an advisory committee, advisory capacity only. All formal direction and approvals of our initiative go through our assembly, and we take our direction from the assembly. Over to you, Jacqueline. Next slide.
Thanks so much, Heather. So band designate. So what is a band designate? And perhaps you've seen job postings in your community and are wondering, you know, what is this role? And it's a person that is hired by the band. And a band designate is someone who can go to court on behalf of the band and state the band's position. So for example, they may express the band's wishes to not have any children leave the community. Of course, all of the comments or positions are just for the court's consideration. And the band designate may also bring forward culturally appropriate services, also for the court to consider. The band designate can also be a second set of ears for the family. It's a lot to hear, it's a lot to absorb, and these things can be explained later with the band designate and family to, you know, explain what maybe certain legal jargon was or social work jargon. And that's important to make sure that you completely understand the process. It's also helpful because band designates will know about upcoming court dates. And so it can become a hectic process for Mi'kmaq families to navigate child welfare. And so this can be a really great resource to lean on, is the band designate in your community. So the MKK team has gone to all 13 communities to do a session with chief and councils, and all 13 communities have hired or are in the process of hiring their band designate. I also want to mention that in July of 2020, we worked closely to develop a case management system, and this case management system is held separately from other servers, and that's because of the type of sensitive information that it must hold. One, we have to know it's secure, and it also, the case management system also helps with the efficiency to do the job, to store notes. It also tracks upcoming court dates as well as documents that may be past due. And it also ensures that, you know, information that is extremely confidential is not laying around. And that's really important. And I just wanted to mention that, you know, to just let folks know that even though this is a new initiative with the band designate and it's not completely familiar, that we've really tried to do the checks and balances to make sure that this is a safe process for you to lean on if that is something that you need to do in the community. Next slide, please.
Okay, I probably went a little bit too much into customary adoption on that last slide I spoke to, but I will maybe just make a few comments here. The name, I didn't mention that earlier, the name chosen for the protocol is Ankwe Unij Ginijana, meaning let us take care of our children. And purpose of the protocol is to create a structure where Mi'kmaq Family and Children's Services, because they're doing the work right now, will be able to use a customary adoptions to address long-term planning and child welfare cases. So the protocol creates a process that's respectful and honors the customs of each of the Mi'kmaq First Nations communities in Nova Scotia. And I mentioned that a little earlier, that we have to have respect for each community. There may be different protocols in each community. So that's an important thing to remember in terms of customary adoption protocols. And the protocol creates a process that forms an alignment between the Mi'kmaq customary law and statutory law, and that can work within the current child welfare legal systems until our child welfare regime has been adopted and implemented and in place and being utilized. Next slide, please.
So this, what you're seeing before you, is quite exciting. Netaway. Netaway, when translated, means I speak. And the concept behind this name was giving a voice to our families who are trying to navigate the child welfare system. So you can see before you, there's various icons. This is very much a work in progress. It is in the, I wouldn't say infancy stages, but it is moving through. We are trying to make something that looks Migma, that feels Migma, hence the images that you're seeing before you. And this app, this tool is something that we needed and wanted to create so that Mi'kmaq people, Mi'kmaq families, Mi'kmaq parents, Mi'kmaq youth will have quick and easy access to information that is, one, user-friendly, and be able to be accessed from computer or from your phone. And we want to have netaway be able to visually show you what to expect. So we're working on, breaking down some of the language and visually mapping that out. And so that at a click of a button, you'll know what your rights are as a youth, as a parent, where you can find your band designate in your community. And you'll also see there's an icon there that's going to be full of resources. Also on the homepage, you'll notice that we put the Kids Helpline, and that's a connectable link. We wanted to have information that is always going to be relevant, and that's something that we're going to be able to manage with this app. This app, netaway, is also going to be available in English and in Mi'kmaq. But phase 1 is the English part, and then we're looking at translating it all over to Migma because that's an important piece of the work we do and the people that we work for. So I did say that it has not launched yet, but it is something that's going to be launched in the very near future. And when we do, there will be a promotional process for that. So you will know when this app goes live. Next slide, please. So thank you, Amy. So this brings us to the end of our presentation today. But before we go, we wanted to share a short video with you about MKK as a recap of this presentation. And some of the information that you're going to hear in the video is some of the things that Heather and I spoke about, but there's also some information in there that will be new. The stats are staggering for the number of Indigenous children in care, and we know that we must do something different. The chiefs recognize that we must do something different. And so this initiative is extremely important, and we are creating Mi'kmaq law for Mi'kmaq children and families that protects children and places them in the center of everything that we're doing. We are coming to community. You're going to see posters, and you're going to see advertisements that we're coming to engage. Please come out. Please share your stories or thoughts with us because we would really love to hear them. And we really want to hear from you. This is a Migma built process, and we cannot build this without the Migma. In saying that, Heather and I are extremely honored to be able to be here to present some of our work to you today. And thank you for taking the time to watch during this very busy and stressful time that we're navigating with COVID. And I think now that we are ready to play the video, Amy.
Okay, so while we're bringing up that video, I just want to say thank you to you both for that wonderful and really informative presentation. And thank you to all of you for joining us today. If you have questions you'd like to ask after we close, or you're watching the recording later on and have questions, feel free to email them into us. And we look forward to seeing you all at our next session in July.
Since 2015, the Migma of Nova Scotia have engaged in a Migma child welfare reform, which resulted in over 25 legislative amendments to the Nova Scotia Children and Family Services Act that directly affect the Migma of Nova Scotia. These amendments have changed the way child welfare services are provided to Mi'kmaq children and families in Nova Scotia. In 2016, the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal found that Canada was discriminatory in its funding models for child welfare for children and families on reserve. So, in an effort to address this and the overrepresentation of Indigenous children in care, the federal government introduced Bill C-92, an act respecting First Nations, Inuit, and Métis children, youth, and families. The Assembly of Nova Scotia Mi'kmaq Chiefs knew that decisions impacting our children and families should come from a Mi'kmaq perspective. Their goal was to find a way forward so that the sole responsibility for our Mi'kmaq children isn't in the hands of other levels of government. Our chiefs wanted to ensure that our children in the child welfare system would not experience loss of community, language, identity, and cultural traditions. In 2017, the Assembly developed a long-term strategic approach for the Migma of Nova Scotia, assuming complete jurisdiction and governance over matters affecting the child welfare of all Mi'kmaq children within Nova Scotia. As part of this approach, the Assembly created the Maugleugikinichana Initiative. When translated, it means keeping our children together. The work of the Maugleugikinichana is to develop our own Mi'kmaq child welfare law, regaining jurisdiction and decision-making authority over our own children. Our goal is to have this work completed by March 2023. Maugleugikinichana works collaboratively with guidance and support from our elders, service providers, and community members. This ensures that the Mi'kmaq law is built by and for our people. The vision of the Maugleugikinichana Initiative is to create a better future for our Mi'kmaq children and families. A future where Mi'kmaq children are resilient, strongly connected to their culture, community, and live in safe, healthy, and nurturing homes. Our mission is to develop a child welfare system that places the child with their family in the center and promotes healing and wellness in a manner that respects our Mi'kmaq values, customs, traditions, and practices. While the goals of Maugleugikinichana are clear, the projects we are working on are diverse, and the input we gather from our community members and advisors are critical to our work. On January 1st, 2020, the federal government's act came into force. Nova Scotia's Children and Family Services Act policies, regulations, and practices with respect to Mi'kmaq children and families had to change to be consistent with the federal act. We were fortunate here in Nova Scotia because we were already well down the path of taking a closer look at how provincial and federal policies impact our Mi'kmaq families and children. We have specialized working groups to address a host of ideas and issues on child welfare. Some of the issues and projects the working group members help us with are exploring ways to expand services, how to decolonize current systems and processes, and how we can incorporate core Mi'kmaq traditions and values of child raising and care into our Mi'kmaq child welfare law. We have a lot to achieve, but everyone involved recognizes how important this work is to our communities, our families, and most importantly, our children. If you want to get involved or learn more about this initiative, we encourage you to contact us. We would love to hear from you. For more information and to see how to contact our team, visit www.migmarights.com.